guys are talking about getting increased capital for businesses, and I guess in the climate that we're in the United States today, every business out there is having trouble getting capital. How do you propose doing that? And given that a lot of Cleantech companies we're talking about, we're talking startups and high-risk investments, how does that happen?
Great. Yeah, happy to take that question. It's a clear question here in the state of Colorado. When you look at the action plan with respect to funding or capital, the main focus is actually using the resources of the state to attract additional private capital to the state. So this is not a call for significant quantities of state money to be put at risk to directly support companies, but it is the call for the state and the stakeholder groups to work together to create what we've called a fund of funds, which is one in which we can attract additional private capital to support these companies and their growth.
So plans like this are notorious for getting written, somebody runs out, talks about it, and then they get put on the shelf. If you call it an action plan, who is going to drive this? Who's going to push the action?
I should really turn it over to Chris as our managing director, but I can say as an industry guy, it's in the industry's interest, certainly, to be involved, to contribute, and to act, to implement. And we come from, if you will, a practice of setting plans and implementing plans for success. And I think some of that philosophy carries over into this document. But there is, in fact, a specific way forward in which CCIA, along with the stakeholders, will meet on a regular basis to monitor progress, to make sure responsibilities for action are being carried out, and frankly, to make adjustments if necessary if we see ourselves lagging behind the plan. Chris, do you want to add to that?
Sure. If you look further into the plan rather than just what we talked about today, you'll see that the actions also include a timetable, the amount of funding that we think is necessary, the stakeholders that need to be driving the implementation. So each action ties a lot together. And through the CCIA structure, we have working groups around each one of the cleantech industry sectors. We'll be bringing in stakeholders as well as our companies to implement these actions that have been identified. Like I said, you'll hear from us in the next 5 years when we accomplish these goals.
Let me add to that. I think that the state really has a stake in this. I mean, obviously 3 months from now there'll be a different administration than we have today. But I honestly believe that whoever that is, but anyway, whoever that is, will take a look at this and realize the level of opportunity that exists here. When you talk about capital formation, one of the very few places where there is capital formation today in the United States is Cleantech. I mean, it's drifted away from many of the other traditional venture areas, but the place where money is still gravitating toward is Cleantech. And I think whoever is sitting in the governor's office 3 months from now will have an opportunity to look at this plan, and I'd be frankly amazed if they didn't realize the opportunity that represented and follow through. So I think the state does have a stake in it, and I hope and believe that the state will follow through to the level of its ability in pursuing that stake.
Looking at the action plan laid out on 13 and 14, it looks like minimum funding required would be about $62 million. Is there any breakdown to what percentage of that would come from government versus private investors?
I don't think we have broken that down between public and private.
Well, if you look at the fund-to-fund idea, it's using a little bit of public seed money to try to drive private capital. And I think that principle, I mean, obviously our budget is to say it's a challenge would be a moderate understatement. But I think still trying to find a way to leverage state assets to create private capital formation is something we have to look at and try to figure out ways to accomplish. We've done it before, even in tight budget times, and I hope that we'll find ways to do it again. But the bulk of that has to come from the private sector in some form or fashion.
You know, that's one of the things we recognize when we develop the plan. is the constraints faced by the state of Colorado right now, and we recognize that we're going to have to find creative ways to fund anything that we want to do, and that could be going to the federal government, going to foundations, going into the venture community or private capital community. That was a given in what we found. Any other questions? Thank you all. I'm sorry, go ahead.
How has funding from DOE been for these ventures? I know that there was some increase in the budget this year, but I believe a lot of that was marked for nuclear research.
I think some of our companies have been moderately successful in attracting the DOE funding. Obviously, there's still much more to be distributed, so I think we're well positioned. Thank you very much for coming.